And welcome back, fellow football fanatics. I actually didn't plan on going live today. If you saw my community post, my internet was down for a few hours, and then I figured, oh, screw it. I'll just have like a 20 plus topic show tomorrow morning and get it all over with for the week. But here we are. First time in a while we're having a roundtable, but I wanted to start these back up because they're fun and I know you guys enjoy them. So JR and Darren are joining us for tonight. Welcome in. Thank you guys for coming on. And I want to start this off by bringing up a really interesting tweet that JR, he runs the show, the Big Ten Huddle on YouTube. They have a Twitter account. They have a lot of beautiful graphics that they put out for different things. You should give him a follow. He released or tweeted out this comparison of Big Ten and SEC teams and talked about how, literally verbatim, quote, Big Ten teams that are better or close to the same as the top teams in the SEC, no one wants to talk about. USC and Georgia being equivalent, Iowa being better than Ole Miss, Oregon being equivalent to A&M, Michigan being better than Texas. Just go over that list and tell us some of your rationale behind that and some of the reactions to it.
Yeah, so Josh Pate just reposted it, so the ratio is only going to grow at this point. But it's all good. I was just telling you guys that I figured something like that was coming from a Josh Pate or an Andy Staples or something like that. So good fun Twitter discourse. But yeah, so I mentioned four matchups: USC, Georgia, Iowa, Ole Miss, Oregon, Texas A&M, and Michigan and Texas. I have to say that I did have two of them being equal, that being USC and Georgia, and Oregon and Texas A&M. I feel like USC is still a very underrated team. I think USC could have won that game against Notre Dame if not for some bad play calling at the end by Lincoln Riley and some of the weather conditions that happened. Now, that's not an excuse. They still lost the game, but I think when you talk about how good a team can be, I see a lot of things that USC does really well, see some things they don't do as well. But for Georgia, I don't quite see the exceptional piece to the team that you normally see with the Georgia team. And so that gives me some pause there. I'm sure we can flesh that out a bit. With Iowa and Ole Miss, I'm just not an Ole Miss believer, guys. I think Trinidad Chambliss, he's been a great story, but I don't think he deserves the Heisman consideration that he's been given. I think that he's an exciting quarterback, but I think if this offense faces a much better defense, then you're going to see them struggle quite a bit. And I know they played Oklahoma, but I would also say that Oklahoma hasn't really faced all that many top tier offenses, in my opinion, this season. I know I'm kind of like getting into the whole like, well, I haven't played anybody type of thing, which I kind of hate, but I do think that it's a good question about the team to face another team. And Iowa, I still think they are underrated on offense. I know that the perception out there is Iowa's offense stinks and everything else, but they really do have more of a passing game now than they did before. I think they could have passed the ball a little bit more against Oregon if they had the opportunities to, but the weather kind of impacted that. It's funny that the weather impacted Iowa more than it did Oregon. And then I also think that an Ole Miss team is not going to have the dominant, as dominant of a running game as Oregon to be able to go against them. So I like Iowa on that one, and then quickly in the last two, Oregon I think is pretty similar to Texas A&M. I'm not a believer in Texas A&M's offense in their defense. I apologize. I like Marcel Reed a lot. I think he's a good player, but I'm not super much a believer in Texas A&M's defense. I think that Oregon is more balanced on both sides of the ball, and that exceptional running game would be the difference in that win over Texas A&M, or at least the equivalence of Texas A&M, and then Michigan over Texas. I just think the last 2 weeks we haven't seen Bryce Underwood put it all together. And to me, if Bryce Underwood puts it all together, this is a top 10 team in college football. The defense is there. They have some injuries right now. I get that. But if they get healthy and Bryce Underwood puts it all together, he's an exceptional talent. He just has to put it all together. And it sounds like the Michigan coaching staff is being more focused about what it is that he needs to improve in. And so who knows? Maybe we'll see that by the end of the year. Maybe it'll take till next year. But regardless, he's a very talented player, and if they let him loose and they let him do what he's supposed to do, and they're a fully healthy team, I I like Michigan's offense more than Texas's offense, in my opinion. And I think the defenses are not quite the same. I'd give the slight edge to Texas, but very similar still.
Yeah, as a Michigan fan, I think I'm immediately drawn, of course, to your comparisons between Michigan and Texas. And one thing I can say for Michigan is, unlike a lot of other teams in this country, sure, Michigan has their troubles. I think the case with Bryce Underwood now is just proof positive that growth is very, very rarely linear. You're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to have your bad games. And Bryce Underwood's kind of unfortunately proving that right now. But the thing with Michigan over a lot of teams is just the fact that they have one thing that they're elite at, and that's their ground game. Their ground game has been very impressive so far this season. And the guys that whose podcasts I listen to, like the MGO blog, the guys that chart the games, the guys that rate the players very similarly to how PFF does and like break down the plays. All the guys that I'm seeing out there that write about the team in that way are all saying that this offensive line is really coming along in terms of the run game. And it doesn't matter who's back there, they're getting yards. Even when freshman Jasper Parker gets in there, he's averaging 5 yards a carry right now. So, another thing, just generally to compare between the Big Ten and the SEC, I think too, is we got to look at the fact that when these two conferences have played each other over the past couple of years, especially when we have playoffs and championships on the line, who is it then that's been coming out on top? So I don't think that it's necessarily as disparate as some people think in comparing the Big Ten to the SEC. And I think a lot of your points are on point there, JR. I do think USC could beat anybody when their ground game is going, when they're running gap scheme run like they like to do, and they're running it effectively. They're dangerous, and of course they have Jade Mayava to throw the ball around the yard and those great wide receivers on top of that. A lot of teams in the Big Ten are really dangerous. Iowa's 3 losses have come against really good teams and really close. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting comparison. Of course, I disagreed with some, but I also agreed with some of it. An example of that is I think a healthy Oregon is better than A&M. Now, Oregon in its current form, no, but they'd match up well and probably beat them with how Oregon is the more complete defense and a rushing attack that against Iowa showed it doesn't just rely on explosive plays, but it can consistently get, 5 yards of push downfield and then that and maybe more with their backs. It's some of the charts that I see, whether it's Stats of War on Twitter or like havoc rate allowed from Game on Paper, like Oregon just can run and run and run and play this game where they can turtle up and kind of take away their passing offense if they don't feel like it benefits them. And that's interesting to me. And I think is one of the most dangerous non-negotiables in a college football playoff where, contrary to what some believe, I don't think there is an invincible team out there, at least not yet. And I don't think there will be for the whole year. So,
well, and that's kind of where some of these comparisons come from a little bit. Is personally, I feel like Ohio State and Indiana are on a different level of college football right now. Does that mean that either one of them is going to win the national championship? No, not necessarily, because it's college football and crazy things can happen. But I think those are the two teams that have the best shot, in my opinion, to win it all. But I think we see a lot of talk about parity in college football, but unfortunately, a lot of that talk gets secluded to the SEC and nowhere else. And so there's this idea out there of, well, everybody in the SEC has just gotten as good as Alabama and Georgia were when they were winning national championships. And my response to that is no. Alabama and Georgia have gotten worse. Yeah. They have come down to the middle. Yeah, it's to the middle of the SEC a little bit more, so you're not seeing them dominate as much. And I don't know how you can make the argument that they have gone up because rosters are getting thinner, recruiting classes are not being dominated nearly as much. I mean, I don't know how you can look at Ole Miss's recruiting class and say that's a team that's just as good as Georgia or Alabama 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know how you can look at the draft picks. I don't think that Ole Miss team has any more than maybe 4 or 5 draft picks on that team for next year. So that's the thing is like the SEC wants to tout talent, and they should. I do believe they have the more talented rosters in most cases, but I think the Big Ten is better at development and has better coaches.
Yeah.
100% from top down. Yeah. Better coaches and the better developers of talent. One like thought experiment I often like to do myself is if you give Lane Kiffin Iowa's roster, is he taking it any further than Kirk Ferentz? I don't think so. Like a lot of those SEC coaches, I think you strip away the talent they have, and I think you suddenly see exactly what kind of coach they are. And we were actually talking about this in my Discord the other day for Darren Talks Ball. Um, the narrative difference between the Big Ten and the SEC, where Indiana struggles on the road against a 3-5 Penn State team, and a lot of the SEC talking heads and ESPN talking heads out there are like, "Oh, is Indiana a bit fraudulent this year, like they were last year?" But Alabama struggles against a what is it 3-5 or 4-4 South Carolina team, and it was, "Oh boy, it's so hard to win in the SEC. You just every week you got to face a tough test." It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Can we at least judge this on equal footing here for once?
Yeah. I mean, especially when Penn State in power ratings and from an NFL draft standpoint is unanimously better than South Carolina, almost across the board. I mean, Grunkmeyer probably isn't that much worse than Sellers. He could even be, I don't know if I'd say better, but Grunkmeyer's had some good games this year. He had high QBRs against Ohio State and against Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And for just like comparison here, looking at strength of schedule adjusted team efficiencies from ESPN, and it's not perfect. Those metrics get seduced more easily by blowouts against small teams than like close wins over the great teams. But USC's 10th in efficiency and Georgia's 9th, and USC's only like a third of a point behind them on a 0 to 100 scale. So they're literally like two sheets of paper, and the distance between them is the distance between those two. Oregon is 4th, A&M is 5th, but there is a 3.7 point difference in favor of the Ducks, who are dramatically better on defense, better on offense. Special teams is the only area where the Aggies have an advantage in. And that's with Oregon suffering a 10-point loss at home to an Indiana team that is second in efficiency, and they're only a fifth of a point behind Ohio State. So there is I agree that the SEC is more talented. I do think that they are deeper, and the context behind that is that Wisconsin in efficiency metrics is like dramatically below a lot, like the lowest SEC team. Same with Purdue, same with UCLA, same with Michigan State. For example, I think the lowest SEC team is in the like 50s. Yeah. But at the top and in the middle, you're seeing that parity spread out, and the coaching staff edge and the culture edge in the Big Ten is taking advantage. And also some of it is the just the freak athlete edge. Like Brian Hartline's the best position coach in the sport, and he gets all the recruits he wants now because everyone knows that he's that guy. So your most freakish room in college football resides in the Big Ten. It's the Ohio State wide receiver room. Oregon has signed the 2 highest quality recruiting classes in a row and usually gets the highest quality transfers. It shouldn't be a coincidence that their offensive line and defensive line is probably the largest or one of the largest on each side of the ball, and they play well because they have good coaches. And then Indiana is, not lightning in a bottle in a flukish way, but for the rest of the sport, there's probably no one else that could do what Cignetti's currently doing at Indiana. Like that's kind of a unique thing by itself. And Riley finally has the offensive line to run his offense, so they're going to put up points and be efficient. Michigan has always been talented. It's just a question about coaching. So that is where I think a lot of the comparisons that you've drawn are actually quite fair. For a minute there, Michigan was ahead of Texas in efficiency metrics. We already talked about how USC and Georgia are comparable. And then Iowa and Ole Miss. So this will shock a lot of you guys listening here, maybe even shock you, JR and Darren. Iowa's 19th in efficiency. Ole Miss is 17th, and they're only separated by half a point on a 0 to 100 scale. So they are pretty like neck and neck. And Iowa's played a much tougher strength of schedule, having to play Indiana and Oregon. Ole Miss really just having to play Georgia on the road and then Oklahoma. on the road, which are really good teams, not quite as good as Iowa's two toughest teams, though.
I am interested in you guys' thoughts on the Lincoln Riley stuff, because I do think that is probably the part that could tear down my argument of USC and Georgia the most. We were kind of talking about Kirby Smart before we came in here into the show, but to me, Lincoln Riley has improved a lot as a coach this year, and I've given him criticism, so I'm not saying that he's perfect or anything like that. Like I think I said it to you guys before. Like the Notre Dame game, I think that that was some poor play calling there. I still think he needs to give up the play calling, but it seems like he has a better command of this entire team. D'Anton Lynn, I believe he's in his third year, correct?
Yep.
He's doing a better job, or second year, sorry.
Yeah.
By the time he's in his third year, he's going to be even better, I think. And this defense is looking a lot better. I think they are doing a good job of meshing power and athleticism on the defensive line. It's actually one of the reasons why I think that Iowa's not going to move the ball very much against USC, is because of what that defensive line can do, and also the safeties on the outside, that they're going to be able to stop Iowa's rushing attack when they try to get outside the tackles. But overall, I look at this USC team and say, and it's kind of the same thing with Iowa too. There's been a long, narrative about this team. Can't play defense. They're soft, all this stuff. Listen, USC beat Michigan. I don't think that was a game where Michigan just turned into pudding all of a sudden. I think that was a game that was a statement game for USC. I took a whole lot more out of that one, saying, holy cow, USC is really, really good, and less about like, well, actually Michigan just sucks, because that's what it seemed like most people said. I would have liked to say that. I'm an Ohio State fan. But if I'm being objective, that's not what I saw.
Yeah, when USC gets like a slight schematic edge on somebody, or they find something that they can pick at, Lincoln Riley's wise enough to know to just keep coming back to that well until the other team makes an adjustment. And that's what I saw in that Michigan game you just mentioned. And they're good enough to do that too. And they're well coached. And that's another thing that bothers me at times, JR, too, especially in the Big Ten. When we had these West Coast teams come into the Big Ten, it's interesting how the narrative around USC and even Oregon, and especially UCLA and even Washington to a certain extent, was, well, these are finesse teams, these are soft teams, these are teams that don't play great defense. I specifically remember some Michigan guys, some Michigan podcasts from a couple years ago. And granted, these are guys that just primarily watch Michigan. They just report on their team. They don't watch college football on a national scale, talking about how Michigan was just going to bowl over Oregon because Oregon doesn't play defense and they don't have good trench play. And I believe that was actually last season when Oregon had like Jordan Birch and another like first or second round defensive tackle. And I was like, we gotta, at some point we gotta wisen up and start analyzing some of these teams more objectively, because the narratives are just, I feel like they're becoming further from reality. And getting back to your point on USC too, I think the biggest improvement defensively for them is they're just tackling much better this year. Under Alex Grinch, they were one of the worst tackling teams in all college football, and that's why they gave up so many yards after catch, so many rushing yards, things like that. And D'Anton Lynn has them tackling much better in space. And I hate to boil it down to a simple point, but that's what good defense often comes down to. Can you churn a little 5-yard hitch route into just a 5-yard hitch route, or is a wide receiver consistently breaking off 10, 15 yards against you? Sometimes that makes all the difference. So, yeah, and like I said earlier, from top to bottom, I think the Big Ten has some really good coaches who are doing more with less, especially in comparison to the SEC, because I do my own version of the blue chip ratio every year where I compare the two conferences. I think the SEC had an average across the conference of somewhere in the upper 50s or low 60s for my own version of the blue chip ratio. In the Big Ten, the average across the conference is something like 30%. So the SEC is swallowing up 4 and 5-star talent from around the country. But when you see the results on paper, and like I said, especially in the last couple of college football playoffs, I'd say the conferences are about that even in terms of performance, and that's because the Big Ten has better coaches. They do.
Yeah, that I don't disagree with that really at all. I was just looking for something here that I wanted to add to the conversation, and I guess that I forgot about it. It's a shame. But to the point that you guys were talking about, like I don't think anyone could do what Oregon did with Iowa and even Wisconsin where like though you don't run on those defenses, and they physically killed them. Where Wisconsin, it was just the entire second half was run, 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 run. It was the same thing against Iowa outside of the first quarter in that final drive where they had to win it. And it's like back in 2023 when Michigan kind of did that to Penn State. And I know that 2023 Penn State would probably be unironically a top 3 or top 2 team this year because the talent's that spread out, and it's not a great year for teams at the top more so. But still, like people were criticizing that at the time. And it's like, no, because a really good defense took away a part of the offense, and a one-dimensional offense was able to move the football enough on that team on the road to beat them. And that's kind of what Oregon has been able to do. Like, I ideally know you would want to be able to pass the football. And it sounds like they're going to get maybe Evan Stewart back for the playoffs. It sounds like all of their injuries are not season ending. So at some point they'll be back, which is good news for them. And I'm not saying Oregon's going to win it all. I agree with JR that Indiana and Ohio State have a better chance to win it all than Oregon. I think Alabama has a better shot to win it all than Oregon. Even if Oregon's healthy, I'd probably say that, but I don't know. It's something that's impressive. And for people to come away from that Iowa-Oregon game and think, geez, well, Oregon's bad. They just haven't watched Iowa. Iowa is... Indiana and Ohio State are the perfect examples of Big Ten teams that have reloaded. And I'll actually go further than this. They're just the most known. Indiana's gotten better than last year. Ohio State, it's wait and see, but the fact they're this good after losing that counts as reloading. Iowa lost a ton and probably got better, or at least is similar. And Oregon's the same. Oregon's probably the same story. They lose a lot. I don't know if they're better than they were last year, but they're close enough. So I'll check the box there. And with the SEC outside of Alabama, who returned a good amount, and depending on what Georgia does, maybe, and then Texas A&M, who returned a lot, the Big Ten is doing more with not just fewer talent, but fewer returning key pieces, too. I mean, even Michigan, Michigan did return a fair amount, but they don't have the talent that A&M or Texas did coming back. And like the gap between them and Texas last year and the gap this year has closed so much that it's not just a player thing. And I find that to be interesting.
I have a question for you guys, actually, because we're talking a lot about like the narratives around the two conferences. And we're talking also a lot about like running games that are able to kind of take over and control football games. We're talking about good defense, which is largely what the Big Ten is known for. Do you guys think that some of the difference in between the way that people talk about the Big Ten, the way that people talk about the SEC, has a lot to do with the fact that the Big Ten does tend to kind of play that kind of boring ground and pound, very much trench focused type of football? I mean, your Iowas, even Oregon, this season is doing a lot of it, like Sam said. I think to the average casual fan, that's very boring football. I don't hate it because I love, watching the defensive tackle masterfully play, a two gap approach or three technique like a champ. But I know that I'm like kind of in like the far right end of the bell curve when it comes to college football fans and their, how much they like to nerd out on their football. But this is something I was kind of thinking of as we're having this conversation is, there's a lot of boring games that are played in the Big Ten, let's be honest, where it's just, can we grind you out for 200 yards on the ground and score 20 to 25 points and come out with a 24-17 win?
I thoroughly enjoyed the Iowa-Oregon game, 18-16, 200 yards on the ground for Oregon.
See, I'm a sicko.
But
I love it. I love that kind of football.
Same here.
Obviously I'm a Michigan fan, so I'm a little biased here. That's what Michigan's been for the last few years. But yeah.
Sam, I'm going to let you take this one first because I have a bit of a harebrained response, and I don't want to take over the conversation with my harebrained response. So go ahead, Sam.
Okay. I'll be excited to hear what your response is. I liked Oregon, Iowa too. I also liked Washington, Wisconsin, because the thing with those low scoring games is, so an example with Georgia Ole Miss, is I got scared for a minute that Ole Miss was going to win that game because I picked Georgia to win, but because they were constantly scoring back and forth, I could kind of gauge who was going to win even when Ole Miss was up by 2 because Georgia's deeper, they're at home. They would have been tied up if they didn't kick field goals, and it just kind of felt like if Ole Miss can't get stops, even if they're this ahead, Georgia can win out with talent and having that, defensive mind that can actually like make adjustments on the fly. With a lot of these lower scoring games that get into these gridlocks, um, it feels like you genuinely just don't know because with the offenses, while it's high flying, high scoring, and it'll come down to especially against a Georgia Ole Miss where it's not because their defenses and offenses are bad. It's just bad offense. The offenses are good, and the defenses are whatever. In the Big Ten, it's not just the ability for an offense to mess up or a defense to get a stop, but you can have defensive scores. You can have a strip sack. That's what happened with Washington, Wisconsin. If Wisconsin doesn't get that strip sack and they don't recover it, they don't win. And it's just exciting to be able to see that type of randomness play out as it often does in those games. Like Oregon, they're in control, and then Iowa has that 4th and goal QB draw for a touchdown. That's their first lead of the day. And then randomly, Oregon can all of a sudden complete the forward pass, and they get down and kick the game-winning field goal. As for the narrative portion, I think that's part of it. Another portion is the fact that the Big Ten TV media deal is horrible. And also the fact that Penn State has totally face planted. I mean, Texas for a minute there did, but you can kind of see where at least people like thought, okay, Texas could be good because you see their offense sometimes, or other times it's their defense, or sometimes it's specifically Arch do extremely well in a given moment. And you think, oh, well, if they could put all that together, then yeah, they'd be a top 5 team. But the Big Ten really got screwed over by entering this media deal and scheduling out the way they did, and then Penn State's horrible. So Indiana-Penn State is no longer a top 5 matchup like it could have been. Like I almost projected it to be preseason. It's now it's Indiana-Iowa part 2. Or Ohio State-Penn State is no longer this matchup between Titans. It's Ohio State versus another one of their Big Ten body pillows. Like that's all it is. So part of it, I think, is the fact that the SEC, they play a more exciting brand, at least in theory, but also for people who can look past that, it's the fact that their games outside of the style are often just better because they're more competitive. Their teams at the top aren't as good as the Big Ten teams at the top, but their teams in the middle at the bottom, and especially at the bottom, are way better. So they play closer, more back and forth games, while Ohio State and Indiana most of the time, or even Oregon, really even Michigan against Purdue. Purdue was live at one point, but they were never in the lead. So there's just not that same, holy cow, they're going to do it. It's more of a, well, this team's going to pull away in the end. And that's not exciting, even if the score's close.
Those are really good pieces of thought there, Sam. I'm going to expand on one of them, and then the other one is kind of my harebrained idea. So the first one, I'll expand on yours a little bit with talking about the perceived, how it's perceived better, how the gameplay isn't maybe all that much different nowadays. The perception is still there of Big Ten, ground and pound, stuff like that. I also think a lot of people like college football for kind of the chaotic craziness of it. You look at guys like Cam Newton and Johnny Manziel, really. Those are some of the guys that everybody dreams about being able to see again. And while those guys were exciting and awesome, those guys, Cam Newton made it in the NFL just fine because of his size, and he eventually became much more coachable and was able to run an offense. But Johnny Manziel was never really the type of guy who was ever going to run an offense for you. Don't know why the Browns ever drafted him, but whatever. That's a different story. So that's common Browns terrible drafting right there. But
Hey, they may have
But
finally gotten it right with Mason Graham and Quinshon Judkins and those guys.
they
They look
they
good.
may have. They just don't have the quarterback.
Yeah.
We'll see this year. But anyway, but I think that in college football, fans like the kind of chaotic nature of it a little bit more. I think fans who appreciate more kind of good, well balanced, well coached football kind of tend to lean more toward the NFL. The people who like kind of more the big plays, exciting, chaotic, lot of stuff, band running on the field. It's college. Like it's just it's crazy kind of stuff. And I think people find themselves drifting more toward college football when they like that kind of stuff. And right now, with the Big Ten being better coached, I think you're seeing more of that in the SEC right now. The kind of the chaos and really talented players, but maybe they don't play within a structure as much, so they can kind of just go out there and do something crazy. Everything Ohio State does is structured. Everything that Michigan does is structured. Everything that Iowa does, like all of these teams are very, very well structured in the way they have their defenses and everything and their offenses. And I'm not saying that the SEC isn't. I'm just saying it's less. And I think
Yeah.
that presents some more exciting play. So that's my first point. My second point is, guys, I really do think the media just doesn't like the Big Ten. And I know that, we can't always blame it on SEC bias and stuff, but it's not always in the sense of the traditional SEC bias of like these teams are higher ranked. I think there are some people who legitimately resent the Big Ten because of the conference realignment and everything. And I think that there are media heads that do not want to give credit to the Big Ten because of the conference realignment. For whatever reason, I don't know why they seem to dislike the conference realignment so much. I know regionality and stuff like that is preferred, but I mean, I feel like we have better football in the Big Ten right now, but other people don't seem to think so. And other people seem to, resent the Big Ten for adding USC and Oregon and Washington. And, there's people out west that say we don't have our conference anymore. It's not out west here anymore. And I get that. I'm sure that is sad. But overall, I don't know why it's the Big Ten's fault. The Big Ten just came in and got teams because a conference was failing at being able to pay their schools. If the SEC did it to the ACC, I don't think anybody would, you know, get mad about it, because let's be honest, the ACC is going away here soon as well, or at least they're becoming a much lower rate conference as well. But I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Am I too harebrained with my idea of the conference realignment, SEC bias, and stuff?
I think both your points are on point. I really like your answer about how the Big Ten is much more structured and organized and kind of more similar to the NFL in its form and function. And that's why I think you're more like casual fans, like you were kind of alluding to, I think tend to go towards the SEC. Because life is super busy right now, still on a break from the channel. I'm doing this literally from my phone for a reason. I hope to get my PC back soon, though, by the way. I watch as much football as I can on the weekends, and it's interesting to me. As you were giving that answer, I was kind of thinking about like the past couple of weekends. I watch a Big Ten game. I watch Oregon versus Iowa, and as I'm watching, I'm trying to figure out what's going on in even any given play. And it seems like any given play in the Big Ten, it's okay. We ran GT counter, and we got our guard and our tackle out to lead block. Did the defense fit that right? And a lot of plays in the Big Ten come down to that kind of stuff, right? Because especially when you're more run oriented, it's very much X's and O's. Did we get enough people out to block? Did the defense have enough people in their gaps? That kind of simple X's and O's stuff. And then I flip it over to a game like Oklahoma Ole Miss, and it's can John Mateer scramble around and find his wide receiver down the field on a broken play, and or can Chandlis or whatever his name is for Ole Miss do the same? And it's a lot of very much like Tech Mobile stuff breaking down. I think it does kind of allude to the fact that the SEC is more talented in a lot of ways, because when you're very equal on talent, a lot of times it comes down to, do you just happen to have that one guy who can make a special play when all other things are even? But that I think that was a very good answer by you, because I see that myself sometimes too. And let's admit it, like we're diehard college football guys. Is the reason why we're committing time outside of watching football to talk about football. We're not casuals here, and we don't really represent the vast majority of football fans, which are casual. And those people are going to tend to lean more towards the exciting, you know, 38 to 33 overtime shootout games, because that's entertainment. So I thought that was a really good answer by you. I also like your reply about the straight up media bias. I didn't really believe it for the first couple of years I was doing this, hosting my channel and everything. But the more I see and hear of other people, especially the nationwide media people, talk about the Big Ten, they don't quite talk about the Big Ten like they do the SEC, despite the recent successes of the conference. Um, the last two national champions are from the Big Ten. We don't ever talk about it. It seemed like the days of Alabama and Georgia winning national championships, people never shut up about it as a reason why the SEC was the best conference in college football. And that just befuddles me.
Yeah, I do think the media bias is a thing, but I think there is also an explanation behind it that isn't totally sinister. In the South, and you find this in Ohio too. It's why Ohio State's like so good as a program. Like football's a religion, and in other parts of America, it's just not. So if a certain part of the country cares more about something, they're probably going to be better at it and also produce more people like in higher expert level like jobs involving that field that are also elite at it. So, I mean, maybe that's not right at all. I know that that's kind of more of a stereotypical thing, but I still think it's true based on people I talk to and how I watch the sport. Like even Vanderbilt and Mississippi State care about football. Like Purdue, do we really think Purdue or Northwestern care like as much about football as like I don't think so. Or
Does Northwestern care about anything? What's the thing that Northwestern hangs their hat on
academics. They're
outside
like
of
a
academics?
research.
Like, is there a single sport? Are they like a tennis school? Like, what is your thing, North?
They
I
care
feel
about
like even for academics, like great academics, but you're not Harvard,
They-
Northwestern. What are
they-
you doing?
they care about line of scrimmage play,
Yeah,
but if they don't win games or if they have Preston Stone at quarterback, it doesn't absolutely matter.
right.
Preston
It's
Stone catching strays over here.
yeah, he deserves it. He is like a basically
really does.
1-to-1 TDI
Honestly,
and
it's
T
part
ratio.
and parcel with being the Northwestern quarterback, is you're just gonna catch strays from every YouTube personality.
Pretty much.
I forget if there's anyone in the Big Ten that's like definitively worse. Oh boy,
Like a worse quarterback.
yeah.
I mean, Aiden Childs got
Brown's-
benched.
Yeah, Ryan Brown's also pretty
Ryan
bad.
Brown.
I mean, he
Yeah,
kind of just chucks the ball up there sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
Aiden
he
Childs
goes for-
was absolutely terrible against Michigan. That was one of the worst performances I've seen in a while. But yeah,
yeah. I mean, I've people have
Hunter Simmons. There you go. He's worse.
yes.
Anybody that Wisconsin's putting out there. At this
Oh
point,
yeah,
really.
yes. Like the entire Wisconsin QB room. Their
Yeah.
leading passer was their punter against Washington.
they had Carter Smith out there, didn't they?
He
Didn't they throw the
averaged less
freshman
than
right
1
there?
yard.
12.
He averaged fewer than 1 yard per attempt.
Oof. Oof.
It's
I
like
didn't see that.
it's
I
like,
mean, you
wait,
can't blame him. He's playing for Wisconsin, and he's a true freshman.
they have no offensive. They have nothing on offense except for like
Yeah.
one running back, and their receivers are good. But if you
Mhm.
don't have good QB, like receiver play doesn't really matter. Same if you don't have good O-line play. Yeah. Carter Smith, 3 of 12 for 8 yards, 0.7 yards
Oof.
per attempt.
Oof.
So bad.
Big Ten quarterback play, baby.
So bad. Oh, yeah. It's
Well, I will
It's-
say about Big Ten quarterback play, I did look it up on PFF, and the two quarterbacks in the country that have the most scrambles, I think it's telling that, they are in the Big Ten, but it's also kind of telling that their teams are just not very good because of the way they kind of play off script a little bit. But it's actually Devon Williams and Nico Iamaleava. Now it's all like SEC under them. It's like Gunnar Stockton, Jackson Arnold, Tommy Castellanos. I guess he's ACC. Lenora Sellers, Diego Pavia. Your next Big Ten one is Ryan Brown at Purdue. And
Surprised you haven't said John Mateer yet. I would assume I guess with his injury,
well, he got
probably,
hurt for a little bit.
Yeah,
so
so his numbers are probably a little lower just because
they
of that.
also like a lot of his runs are like designed runs where they give him a numbers advantage. Like he rarely scrambled against Michigan. They were just running
Yeah.
like quarterback power or zone read And like if he had a numbers advantage, he just took it and got like 4 or 5 yards.
He's that kind of running quarterback too, where it's a little bit more Tebow than it is like Mike Vick. It's like we're going to run like midline read a few times with this guy. We're not going to allow him. We're not going to rely on him to scramble around.
Yeah, there are yeah, I mean, Washington's O-line, I don't know what you guys think about this, but I've had this thought ever since the Ohio State game, and I wanted to see more just to make sure it wasn't just Ohio State's defense is that good. But John and I talked about this on his show. Like, their offense, when it goes up against a front that's good, just can't do anything. Like they're paralyzed.
Yeah, I mean they've had some injuries, so I do want to try to make that distinction.
fair.
You know, Carver Willis and John Mills haven't played the whole season. I think what's his last name? Asperosa, I think is his last name. Drew Asperosa,
Oh, Drew,
the right tackle. He's injured as well. I don't think he's playing this week. So they have had some injuries on the offensive line, but you're correct. I mean, you can't just rely on 5 guys all season long. Not bad run blockers. You know, Carver Willis and John Mills, when Jonah Coleman was running behind them on the left side, it was actually working out pretty well. But you know, both those guys missed multiple games, and you know that really hurt him there. But I totally agree with you on the Wisconsin thing. Like Wisconsin doesn't get enough credit for what their defensive front is. They have played basically all the good rushing teams in the Big Ten, and they are still allowing yet less than 4 yards per carry. They faced Oregon, they faced Iowa, they faced Michigan. They faced all of these teams that are really good running the ball teams, and they're still allowing less than 4 yards per carry. It's not.
That's crazy.
I think it's 8th in the Big Ten is what they are. But if you face all those teams, you should not be in the top half of the Big Ten.
Right.
Yeah. They're I mean I think the only school that ran on them for more than 5 yards per carry when you took out the sacks, and maybe I'm mistaken there, is Oregon. I think that's it. Like everyone else, they've kind of kept under wraps.
Iowa might have. I can't remember.
Yeah, maybe.
I'll have to go back and check. But yeah, it's either Iowa or Oregon. Yeah.
Is it Washington that's also had the insane road to home splits this season, where they're just terrible on the road, but they're pretty good at home?
Yeah,
check. I feel like
they
that's
were
been a
down
thing.
20-0 at Maryland, and then they came back and won that one, so it would have been even worse. But yeah, they lost 24-7 to Michigan. They lost 13-10 to Wisconsin. They beat Rutgers like 42-20 at home. The Ohio State game, it was like 24-6.
Yeah.
And then there was another home game where they just absolutely blew out the team.
Illinois.
Who it was? Illinois.
Illinois. That's right. Yeah.
Take down my Illinois shirt back there for mentioning that.
I mean, USC similar. I know they haven't lost as much, but Lincoln Riley is never cut at USC. He's never covered in a game outside the state of California. He's never covered the spread.
Wow.
That's a wild stat.
I actually think USC has performed much better on the road this season than they have other seasons. Now, that's not to say that they're like one of the best teams on the road. They were very bad before, but you know, they beat Purdue, they beat Nebraska. They were in that game against Notre Dame. Like I said, if it wasn't for some poor play calling at the end, it probably would have been a 1-score game.
If they hadn't have scored too quickly against Illinois on the road, they probably would have won that game too. They just scored too quick. They were like at what, the Illinois like 40, and they decided to throw it into the end zone. Yeah, right after the 2-minute warning, they immediately went for the shot, and it's like, what are you doing here? Yeah.
Lincoln Riley just wanting to get points instead of like trying to understand that you can like chew the clock and not like have to take the shot. But
and
whatever.
That was my biggest concern, because they still had Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders back then. Like they still had the dynamic duo of those two. Right. I was like, oh crap! Like they're just gonna run the ball here and get it in, and Illinois is gonna lose. And then he just threw the touchdown pass. And I was like, all right, awesome, get a field goal and we win.
Not air raid mastermind Lincoln Riley, baby. We're gonna throw the ball.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even when it's to our detriment.
Do you want to, so before we get on out of here, I do want to go over quickly some of the Week 12 games, just very quickly. Do you guys like have a team this year that you like, but that you will love next year, not just like them?
I got to say that this is going to be me. I'm going to seem like a homer here. But I want to say that for Michigan. I really do.
I was about ready to say Michigan.
Yeah, I like the resolve Michigan has had this year. I think Michigan is kind of like narratively, they're kind of a victim of their own fan base's heightened expectations that I still think were very unrealistic to start the season. We had people saying that they could have gone undefeated, and that was, at the time I was like, "What are we doing here?" But you see how young the team is playing. In their last game against Purdue, I think I counted 7 freshmen at 7 different positions on the defense that played a considerable amount of snaps. An offensive line that's primarily redshirt freshmen and sophomores right now, outside of Gio Hadi, who isn't even playing better than the guy he's rotating with right now in Afobe, who is a redshirt freshman himself. With a freshman quarterback, with all that they have returning offensively as well, I really like Michigan next season because and like I said earlier, all the guys who chart this team and do a pretty good job of it, in my opinion, are talking about how this offensive line is coming along and how in a couple of years it might even look like the 2021, 2022, 2023 offensive lines if it keeps trending this way. So I really love Michigan going forward in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I really do think Nebraska is set up well for the future. They have some guys that are going to graduate and be gone on the offensive line, but I don't know if that's the worst thing in the world because the offensive line, and it's not been all the offensive line's fault. I do think some of the protection by the running backs hasn't been there as well. But um, yeah, I think Michigan's a really good answer. Nebraska, if Matt Rule can keep improving and stuff like that. I don't know what they're going to do about TJ Lateef and Dylan Raiola. TJ Lateef looked really good against who'd they play when they why am I blanking on who they played?
UCLA.
UCLA. Yes, I was like
UCLA,
USC.
yeah.
I was like, no, they didn't play USC. What am I talking about? They played them before. He did not look good against USC, but yes, UCLA. Thank you, Sam. And then I do think Oregon's going to continue to get better. The stable of running backs and Alik Terry. It doesn't seem to matter how many guys graduate. I think he's had a Joe Moore Award finalist offensive line like almost every single year he's been at Oregon. It's insane. People don't talk about this dude and how good of an offensive line coach he is. He just brings in new guys every year, and it's like, here you go. They're really big and they're really physical and they're really talented. Go to the
He's put
NFL.
some
We'll bring
guys
in
in the
another group.
league. Yeah. I mean, they just had a left tackle go on the first or second round. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And Dante Moore, that's a good answer. Dante Moore coming back with those young
I
wide
think he probably
receivers
does
too.
come back. I think his
Yeah.
stock was up there for a little bit, but it may have
Yeah.
lowered recently. He might come
Yeah, I
back.
think
We'll
he's
see.
coming back at this point. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's a good answer. Before, if you don't mind, real quick, Sam, I do want to ask one question to JR because we're getting closer to the game, and I'm not on X anymore. I'm not on Twitter, whatever. The only like Ohio State fans I regularly interact with are those in my Discord. So I just want to kind of ask, what is the general vibe for Ohio State fans this year heading into the game against Michigan? Because I'm curious, because I know Ohio State, let's be honest, is a much better team right now than Michigan. Um, but yeah, I'm just curious.
I'd say it's pretty similar to the way it's been the last few years. They think they're going to win the game, and they should win the game. I mean, this is what I've said. You know, pretty much ever since 2 or 3 years ago. Ohio State should win the game, but I cannot pick them to win the game until they win the game. So, at this point, you got to make it happen. So, I think the general vibe is like just don't really like they're gonna kind of give off that like we're gonna beat them and everything like that. But honestly, it's just not all that much of a talking point right now because I think a lot of the fans kind of feel the same way where it's like we want to see a win. Like, yeah, we're gonna root for Ryan Day and everything else, and like he's a great coach, and he won a national championship. He could win another one this year, but at the end of the day, like you got to see him win in Ann Arbor, and I do think it does concern some people. Not everybody, but some people that it is in Ann Arbor, and Michigan has been better at home than they've been on the road for the most part.
Yeah, I think there's all the reason in the world to be hyper confident, but then you look at the recent history, and I try to like think about how I break down the game if I was doing videos right now for my channel, and I find this one probably more so than the recent years, really, really difficult to break down because I think Ohio State in every major area outside of ground game is the better team. I don't think that's really arguable. I know Michigan's defense has been better in recent weeks, but Ohio State's defense has been the best in the country, especially consistently in the red zone too. And that's a streak that's been going for a couple of years now. The thing I keep coming back to though is Michigan just has that running game, And we know in the game over like the past 20 seasons, it's been the team that runs the ball that wins the game. I feel like if there's a year that trend will get broken, it'll be this year. But the second I start thinking of that, then I start thinking about how well Jordan Marshall's played and how well that Michigan offensive line has played, and they'll probably, hopefully, get Justice Haynes back, and then it's like I don't know. I don't know how to feel, honestly, as a Michigan fan headed into this season. I think I have more question marks this season than I've actually had in a while. And that's partly because last season I didn't have any question marks because I thought Michigan was going to get their asses handed to them, and for some reason somehow they didn't. But yeah,
My favorite part about last year was I had Michigan fans in my comments telling me that the game didn't matter beforehand, and then once Michigan won, and it wasn't every Michigan fan. I shouldn't say that about everybody, but there were a
yeah.
select few, and then they were the ones telling Ohio State fans, "Hey, you didn't win the national championship because the game, you think the game doesn't matter." And I was just like, "That's a little ironic
Oh
to
my
do that,"
God.
but of course,
It's very ironic.
There were a lot
you're
of
gonna have
Michigan
rivalry
fans.
banter. Yeah, you're gonna have
Yeah,
rivalry banter any way you can have it. So the last thing I'll say is just I do think that Ryan Day has been doing more of using the pass to set up the run, and so I do think that's giving Ohio State fans some more hope this season. But again, got to see him win it. So Blue Wolverine
yeah.
with another super chat. He's awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Blue Wolverine, for the $10 super chat. That's what I wanted to highlight and say before I gave my thoughts. So JR took Oregon. That was the team that I was going to mention about who I like this year but love next year. So I'll just go with USC briefly. I think that USC is a team that starter wise and health wise, if like when they're totally healthy, is probably top 10, but their depth is some of the worst if you interpret depth as the discount in caliber of play from starters to backups. I think their depth is probably some of the worst in the Big Ten if you look at it that way. I just think getting another portal cycle, bringing a lot of guys back and bringing in that recruiting class and maybe just having one or two true freshmen really hit could be extremely beneficial. They also do get some big games at home, which they, outside of the Michigan game, haven't had this year. And last year, I know they had Penn State and Notre Dame, but last year, realistically, was a rebuild. For Michigan, Ohio State, I'm on Twitter pretty frequently. I'm on YouTube. The Ohio State consensus, and more so than the Ohio State fan consensus, I think the consensus in college football right now is Ohio State's going to win. And it reminds me, it reminds me a lot of last year and probably 2021, 22. There was the back and forth, and this is a controversial opinion I hold, but I think that Ohio State was blessed in 2023 to have that final drive. I don't think those teams were as close as that game indicated. Maybe that's incorrect, but I just think Day actually called a really good game there. And for once, Michigan had the better roster and it just didn't line up properly. This year, what I keep coming back to is Ohio State's roster's better. They should win. Michigan State, maybe Michigan has slightly better special teams, but not by much. Their special teams have been pretty bad this year. But I have been coming back to the run game and the fact that Michigan's offense will be the best offense they've played all year once you account for Washington's scaling issues. So Washington didn't have the trench play to be able, and you knew this before the Ohio State game, where, they gave up a ton of sacks to Wazoo, to some of their lesser opponents. They didn't have the trench and defensive play to really win that game, at least in a convincing way. It would have been a pure upset back and forth. They somehow get a late touchdown and win, and that was never going to happen with hindsight because Ohio State's that good. Michigan has that. And while I won't be picking Michigan to win, at least as of right now, and I probably won't be anyway, I'm pretty sure that Michigan is going to play this game a lot closer than most people expect. It has less to do with analysis of just the two teams, but of power ratings, factoring in home field advantage, and then what the national media is saying. Like, no one's going to be picking Michigan to win here, guys. If you are, you're a genius or you're a little bit of a contrarian, and probably at least a little bit of a contrarian. I mean, Ohio State's much better. The one thing I will say about them that's concerning, I mean, obviously, Michigan's run game, you could say, but Ohio State's defense is really good, including against the run. Ohio State's offensive line, it's been something I said in the preseason, and I got ratioed for it a lot. It is an offensive line that, again, is good. It is filled with good players, some of whom will play on future on Sundays. It is not this Joe Moore Award caliber unit. And I think that the past few weeks has shown that. And what has helped some of the numbers is Sayin is just that good. He completes 80% of his throws. He's mobile in the pocket. He is super accurate. And as much as the running backs are young and aren't Henderson or Judkins, there's this one play against Purdue where Jackson gets hit in the backfield and then spins out for like 4 yards and picks up the first down. The backs from a blue chip ratio standpoint are more talented than most of the defensive fronts they'll face. So I'm kind of thinking that, like, rushing offense, I can actually pull it up on, this is the last thing I'll say before any of you want to rebut or we move on to week 12 games. But looking at gameonpaper.com for offensive numbers, you look at yards per rush, Ohio State is sitting at 104th. So that's probably the one area where if it does come down to ground and pound, like, Michigan will actually have an edge. Whereas last year, it was kind of shocking they even had the rushing advantage last year. Like, they shouldn't have, but they did. But Ohio State should win. I'm worried that the expectations might be different from reality, and how, with this being a rivalry, that could affect the two coaching staffs and rosters, but we'll see.
Yeah, like I was saying a minute ago, this might be the year that the winner of the rushing battle wins the game trend finally gets broken. And it's not just on how good I think, or great even I think Ohio State's passing attack is. It's also keeping in mind with the fact that Michigan's secondary this year is probably the youngest that it's been in quite some time. The Rod Moore injury is really hurting. Playing guys like Jaden Sanders, TJ Tevis Metcalf back there, Jaden Mangum, the MSU transfer, some guys who are young and also some guys who, frankly, aren't the replacement level that they'd want to be for the guys that they're replacing, like Makari Page and other guys we've seen back there over recent years. Mike Sanders still. That's really concerning to me. I really think that with Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. Going up against that Michigan secondary that's a little depleted both because of injuries and just because of turnover right now, I think Ohio State really could kind of throw to win this game more so. They can kind of leverage that advantage more so than they've been able to in recent years.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Before we get on out of here, any other topics you want to discuss before we get into some Week 12 games?
I don't think so. I'm ready for it.
I'm good.
All right. Let me hit you. So, any of the big teams, Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, you expect them to win and cover? Anything you're looking to pay attention to in any of those?
I do want to see what happens with Indiana's offense against Wisconsin. The offensive line continues to have injuries. And as we talked about against Washington, Wisconsin, really good front. I don't think Indiana's in danger of losing the game at all, but I do want to see what that offense does.
Yeah,
with,
if they
against
win,
a better front.
like if they win 30-3 and they have to kick a bunch of field goals because they can't scale in the red zone, or if they win 56-3.
Yes.
Okay.
Signetti's going to be pissed if he can't win by at least 50.
He's pissed when he wins by 50 sometimes.
Is he ever happy? I might need to consult some of my DSM and stuff over here. He might have some issues. I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to do that from afar. There's a thing called the Goldwater Rule. Anyone who knows out there, don't fill in the comments. I know. It's tempting though. That man's an interesting case. I'll say that. Don't you just
Michigan.
love bringing me on, Sam?
Well, yeah, no, I was pausing to try and find the next game. I'm exhausted for whatever reason, but just is what it is.
I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, Cignetti and Saban, and I mean, you could even say this with like Brian Kelly and Urban Meyer. Like there are some really interesting like head cases. I think Meyer's
Yeah.
probably the best example personally. Kicking the
You got to
kicker.
be a little dysfunctional to be a good football coach in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Jim Harbaugh.
Oh my gosh.
Steak and milk, baby. Steak and milk.
You can't eat chicken. That's a nervous bird.
Sleeping over with recruits, can't eat chicken, called halfback tosses on 3rd and long. Like just so crazy. I miss that guy.
Grass. Loves mowing his grass too.
Yep.
Therapeutic.
Loves mowing his grass. Very therapeutic.
Anything from Michigan Northwestern? Michigan's favored by 11.5. I know some people I trust like Northwestern, but also Michigan in theory should win pretty handily given Northwestern's strengths and weaknesses.
I just want Northwestern to win, but I do think they have a chance to cover, and it's not so much because I am not fond of this Michigan team. I just talked about how they're better than Texas, but just the injuries and stuff like that on the road. Possible look-ahead spot to Ohio State in a couple weeks. It's a young team. I think sometimes older teams there's less of that concern with, but just kind of depends, I guess, on how Sherrod Moore does it. So I predicted 24-20, but that's probably as close as I'd go. I don't think Northwestern would win the game, but they could give him a good game.
I just want to see Bryce Underwood improve. He's really got to show me something heading into that Ohio State game, because as much as I talked up the Michigan run game in that Ohio State matchup, you're still going to have to throw the ball. You can't win with the 2023 Penn State game plan against this year's Ohio State team, no matter how good Jordan Marshall is looking. So I want to see Bryce Underwood, complete, decent to average amount of passes percentage wise, and I want to see them figure some things out too. Watching back on the film, there have been, kind of a lot of there seems to be a small batch of passing plays in terms of the drop back passing game that they're willing to utilize with him. I think honestly they need to kind of expand that a little bit and trust him a little bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does seem like with how good the offensive line is, they're shockingly good in pass protection. They're even better in run blocking, and the young tight ends have really come on. And I do think, for example, if Michigan got Cam Coleman in the portal, and that's really all they did and brought everyone else back and probably another one or two good receivers and not elite, the offense could be really, really good. But it's a year away. And there's just inconsistencies. I mean, sometimes the receivers play well, and sometimes the quarterback does, and sometimes they do not. And I feel like the Purdue game was kind of both at the same time, where when the QB was playing well, where I remember Bryce had this amazing throw to the end zone, McCulley didn't even see it properly, and just he wasn't even near it. And then another time where there was a receiver open in the end zone, Underwood doesn't see it, and
it was McCulley. It was literally McCulley was wide open.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that literally.
Yeah, so it was a little ironic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just they need to play together, and I do think that in the spot against Ohio State, there's probably a better chance of that happening than against Purdue, but we don't even know if that'll be good enough. So they do have to show us some things. For some other games, Iowa USC. Iowa's still ranked in the college football playoff poll, and I liked that because I do think they're that good. Any thoughts on this one?
Go ahead. I went first last time, Darren. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say real quick, it's going to be really interesting because, like I mentioned earlier, USC's run attack is very well endowed in the school of running gap scheme stuff like power and duo and stuff like that. That's what Iowa is attuned to stop, is getting the guys in the right gaps at the right time. So that's a really interesting schematic matchup there, I think, between Lincoln Riley's run game plan and Phil Parker just being, the goat of defensive coordinators out there in college football in terms of his guys just consistently always being technically sound and filling the right gaps. So that's a really interesting game to me, just on that front.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of perception out there that USC could be in trouble against Iowa's run game in this one because of what Notre Dame was able to do against USC early on in the season, or earlier on, not early on, but when you go back and watch that game, I went back and watched that Notre Dame game. Notre Dame was running a whole lot of stuff just right up the gut of the offensive line, and that's not really the way that Iowa operates. A lot more stuff to the outside. I mean, they still do run it up the gut, obviously, but a lot of stuff to the outside. They kind of rely on their wide receivers to block and getting their tight ends out there, obviously, as well. And so I think USC, and it's one of the points I was making earlier about them, I think they're athletic enough on the defensive line that that's going to be something they're going to be able to handle better than some other teams. I think you saw it with Oregon and how they were able to handle it. And also, I think USC has a good shot to get some pressure on Mark Gronowski and create either negative plays or just no yardage plays. And when that happens, you get Iowa into 3rd and 5 or longer. That was one of Iowa's biggest issues against Oregon, is that they averaged 3rd and 5.4. And so the fact that I think they only had one, maybe two, 3rd and like 1 to 3 yards or something like that. And that's just really detrimental for Iowa if they can't get in those 3rd and short situations. So Oregon, better defense than USC in my opinion, but I do think that USC has the guys that they can make that happen. So I like USC to get the win in this one.
Yeah, it's also Iowa at home versus on the road theory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see this with a lot of teams like that aren't at the top in the Big Ten. Like, who they are on the road is just dramatically different from who they are at home. I think an example of this is even like Michigan USC. USC is a bad matchup for Michigan, but I do wonder if you play that game in Ann Arbor and Michigan gets the bye and USC doesn't. Does Michigan win? Well, not in the same dominant way, but do they win for the sole purpose that all those compounding factors just swing in the totally opposite direction? And for Iowa, coming off that tough loss, and no, USC does not have the defense that Oregon does, but USC also has like receivers. Iowa, like Oregon in that game, did not at all. And Maiyava's been a better quarterback. And they get an extra day of rest. They're hosting. They're not coming off an emotional game. And it's a tough spot for Iowa. If they can win, I would be very impressed. Now, what will be funny is seeing USC and Iowa fans compare their teams afterward when the circumstances are totally different and the matchups are totally different. Like, if Oregon just had, if Gary Bryant were healthy and one of Stewart or Decorian Moore is healthy, they probably win that game pretty convincingly with how it played out. So I like USC too. I like them by 7 to 10 points. Maybe it'll be even by more. Any final thoughts on Week 12? Any games outside the Big Ten you guys will be paying attention to? I know that my eyes will be peeled on Texas and Georgia.
Yeah, Texas and Georgia is a great one out there. I believe there was one from either the ACC or the Big Ten that I had my eyes on, or the Big 12 that I had my eyes on as well. I'll have to look really fast. Well, Clemson and Louisville, that's another one where I do think Clemson has the talent to be able to give Louisville a good game, and that one's on Friday night. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one. And it's played right before Minnesota, Oregon, so I'll at least be able to catch some of it. And then Virginia and Duke, that's the other one.
Ooh, a little bit of ACC championship game elimination.
As somebody who does work for the Illini now, I am inclined to, want the Illini to have a win over a college football playoff team. So if Duke can get to the ACC championship and get to the college football playoffs, that'd be good.
That'd be really cool. All right. Is that it for tonight, gentlemen?
I think that's all I really got. Appreciate you having me on again.
Of
That's it.
course. Yeah. Guys, we're going to try and do this again weekly. It's been pretty hectic with all the changes we made to the channel and different stuff going on in my personal life, but I think we can have it going on every week. We will be back at you tomorrow, where I'll be doing a live for some final previews of the weekend and also a lot of different team specific topics and conversations. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to Blue Wolverine for that $10 super chat. And please make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Check out Darren's channel at Darren Talks Ball. Give his channel a subscription and hit his notification bell. And do the same thing with JR's channel, the Big Ten Huddle. See you guys very soon and have a great night. Stay safe.